think a lot of what I learned just kind of picking up, seeing what my mother would do as a first grade teacher, was very much about making visual media to communicate something. And I think that was sort of submerged into the idea of making stuff, was how to make it some kind of language or communication. And a lot of those principles I feel like I learned from my mom as a very small child. I still feel like I incorporate that in my day-to-day, life, making things. When I was little, I didn't even want to be an artist. I wanted to be like a stuntman or an actor for a movie. Nice. But when I would, so like anything, I would always do what I was passionate about. But I would jump out of a moving car a lot, practicing my stuntman routine.
As a child.
But I would get negative reinforcement for that. Oh, right. And then if I drew like a picture, I would get positive, or at least less negative reinforcement for the more active things. So I think
less suicide.
I did the same thing. My father would push me out of the car, and actually that's.
Well, Bill, let's go to you, Bill.
Okay, actually, there's an old saying that Arthur Miller said that he didn't choose playwriting; that playwriting chose him. And I suppose that's about as close as I can get to saying how art sort of infected me. I mean, I drew on the walls as a kid. I remember the first experience I had. With realizing there was anything different as far as a calling was in kindergarten. We had to draw pictures of, and this is again in not very politically correct times, I had to draw an Eskimo or an Inuit. And I drew one, and all the kids came over and they wanted to know how I did it, and I thought that everybody could draw. And I thought, wow, it sort of made me feel different and a little bit special, and it was like, wow, this is what I want to do. And I wanted to do it because I love creating and drawing, like what David's saying. The whole idea of communicating. My father wanted me to be an electrician, so I learned electrical wiring. I was totally into sculpture. So when I got into comics, I always loved comics. So when I started doing comics in the regular sort of venue and art routine, a lot of the stuff that I had learned in terms of collage and painting and sculpture and wiring, I kept feeling like you couldn't do that in comics, and I felt, why not? And to me, I think the answer, the question is always, why not? And I think that's one question that we always strive within ourselves. Being supposed to speak for everybody here is where, is to push and explore and discover. So that's pretty much, and that continues to this day. It's the bumper sticker that a bad day of fishing is better than a good day at work. As hard as it's been on any given day, this is still fishing.
Hey Brad, how about you?
Me?
Barron, I'm sorry, Barron Storey.
I echo the sentiments that you've been hearing from these other guys. I have to say that it's the feedback that you get that really counts. I think drawing is as natural as breathing. You realize that you're communicating to somebody when your little brother says, that looks like mommy when you draw a stick figure, or something like that. And over the years, I'd have to say that it was the responses that I got from people to the drawings that I made that made me realize, like these other gentlemen, that this must be a calling. This must be my thing. And by the time I was in school, I was the go-to artist for posters and all that stuff. And it was like I was already in the business, I didn't even expect to do that, but it was happening. And my parents were hugely supportive, hanging my drawings up, sending portraits that I did of celebrities to the celebrities. When I was about 8, I got a letter from Dwight D. Eisenhower. Wow. Because I did a portrait of him. It was probably from a distant secretary, but it was pretty impressive. So my future was all laid out for me. And one thing I would like to mention, and this is, I think maybe something that some people have shared, I don't know. I went to a really tough school. A lot of bad energy in the school. There are a lot of really tough people around, and fights were common. Nobody messed with me because I drew terrific monsters.
Stephanie, how about you?
I've always been creating. My parents were really encouraging of crafting. My mom would make little felt animals when I was little with me and eating, and it's just always been something that that's just been you know, it's like breathing basically. Like I can't imagine not doing art. And so it's always been a part of me. I mean, I was a school for sculpture, but I've predominantly been doing drawing, and I also have my own jewelry business as well. So I guess I get my sculpting in that way. But.
Kent Williams, how about you?
Well, certainly I think that my story is probably a lot like everyone else's here. It was a way for me to vent that pent-up enthusiasm that I had for things like movies and film and comics. I remember as a kid, I would go out early Saturday morning and collect bottles out of the ditches. You know, we'd take them in and get your 5 cents or 2 cents or whatever it was at the time. And then I would, you know, have my $1.50 or whatever it was at the time to catch the matinee to see my Hammer horror film for that weekend, right? And you know, of course, my mom, you know, I was going by myself, and my mom didn't know that I was going primarily to see that nipple shot, you know, that, that occasionally they would have in it. But if she knew that, I guess I wouldn't have been able to go. But so I kept quiet, you know.
Hey, smart man. Ryan, how about you?
Obviously, I'm coming at this from a little bit of a different angle as a designer, but honestly, I started out doing drawing illustration like when I was 3. I was really, really into drawing. Went to university for illustration, and at some point, I realized that I was an okay illustrator, but I could be a pretty great designer. It just made a lot of sense to me compositionally to be able to present images in a correct frame. There's a lot of design out there that can be overbearing and overpowering, and you think of design as kind of like a soundtrack to a film, in that if you don't notice it, it's correct. So I find myself in this position where that's how I try and present the work in a way that's subtle and respectful and is an excellent framing mechanism.
Jason, how about you?
I think my father, for the most part, he didn't become a professional, but he introduced me to art. He was always drawing. He was always drawing, and it was a way I could connect with him by trying to do what he did, and so it was our own little special thing. Over the years, then, it's kind of evolved as to loving comics and just getting to experience and experiment with these worlds and just drawing cool shit. And then now, images are immediate. There's something that I want to translate or get across to myself, and it happens very fast, or it's something that I want to get across to some other people, and you know, the picture's worth 1,000 words. You go in to see a painting and it affects you. It should affect you immediately and powerfully. And that's an amazing gift to be able to do. And I've seen that, and all I want to do is keep experimenting with it and seeing how far I can take it.
Grant, how about you?
Like so many other people, I think it's really important if your parents encourage you to do this stuff. And my parents were quite poor, so if I wanted a toy spaceship, they would hand me a cereal box and 2 toilet rolls. So go make a spaceship. And so kind of that's the way we worked, you know. If my father wanted a table, he'd find a huge bit of wood, stick some legs on it. So we were encouraged to make things because we couldn't really afford to buy things. And that was, I think it was a really great grounding in art. And it was just something that I was always interested in, making stuff, drawing stuff. We were always encouraged to do it. But I found that the world outside is not necessarily as encouraging. I tried to get into an art school class when I was 8 years old to actually learn how to do art. And my entry for this piece was 100 drawings of Hitler. So I had like 100 Hitlers, boy Hitler, granny Hitler, astronaut Hitler, fireman Hitler. And they showed it to the people in the art school, and they said, maybe you should call a social worker.
You'd win the Turner Prize with that now.
So yeah, I mean, but sometimes the world outside doesn't encourage you as much, but you have to persevere. And I was lucky in the sense that I grew up when punk was happening, and that was a time when everyone was just allowed to express themselves. It didn't matter if it didn't sound like Pink Floyd. It didn't matter if you were banging your guitar with a hammer. as long as you were making art, as long as you were expressing yourself. So I feel quite lucky to have grown up in that time and had that encouragement to always express myself and say what I wanted to say.
You could get a gallery show with Hitler drawings now.
I bet I could, yeah. I'd be a radical avant-garde artist with that one, right?
How about you, Dave?
Damn, all the best answers have gone already. I mean, as a child, I just loved drawing. My father drew a bit. He wasn't a professional artist, but it was what gave me pleasure. Simple, nothing more big or small than that. And then, I mean, looking at it from a sort of evolutionary point of view, art is our peacock feathers, really. It's, you know, it's art we show off. And as a kid, I like that. I like getting a pat on the head, a bag of sweets. So that was fine. And then, a little older, I went to art school and noticed that what I really loved was the feeling of empathy with my fellow students. And I got to know them through their drawing, really. And I tried to kind of explain what I liked about the world and what I'd noticed about the world in my drawings. And so art is a sort of empathy machine. And then now, it's sort of changed again. Most of my circle of friends are now in their 40s and 50s and professional people, so I know scientists and people involved in politics, and all sorts of people, and suddenly they all seem to have very, very important jobs, and I'm still drawing pictures. So and it doesn't seem to be quite important enough. So I'm trying to find where that importance is, and it probably is going back to that empathy machine as a way of looking through somebody else's eyes. Most of the artists and creators that I love have a point of view and they explain it through the films and the writing that they make, and I get to look through their eyes for a little bit. So I guess I'm just trying to do that.
Excellent. Something you brought up, looking through each other's eyes. What are some of your favorite collaborations? So many of you up here work hand in hand with different artists, writers. So starting with Jason, what is your favorite collaboration that you've ever done with a different person?
There's one of the guys that's in here, Jim Mafu. What he and I do look like they should never, ever be in the same room together. But he's so good at what he does, and there's so much energy to it. And he's passionate. It's a genuine thing that he has for his work, that when we do, we meet at bars more often than not. And sketch quite a bit on placemats and all that stuff. So there's actually tons of probably thrown away or stolen from bus boys and stuff like that, the placemats that we have. But there's something really fascinating about collaborating with someone that is your polar opposite. And we do that really well together. It keeps you on your toes, and it's always interesting.
How about you, Dave?
I've been really lucky to have a really lovely bunch of collaborators over the years. Grant was one of the first, and we were both kind of at a really great point where we'd reached a certain level with what we were doing, but knew that we had to change and push out and do something else. So we had a great lunch where we ripped up basically what everybody assumed we were doing at DC Comics, and charted a sort of new course. And I still remember that lunch. It was wonderful. Lots of talk about Jan Schwankmeyer and Dennis Potter, I seem to remember. And then obviously I've worked with Neil since we started. We started together when Neil was a struggling journalist and I was still in art school. And so that's been lovely, sort of growing with somebody. And we've both seen the absolute worst of each other, so there's no bullshit at all. And then recently I worked with an evolutionary biologist called Richard Dawkins, which was amazing. I had to, woohoo, indeed, that's his middle name. And I had to completely change my way of working because he was looking for very specific things from my contribution that would help him really clarify his words, and the science had to be correct, and all sorts of things I'd never had to deal with before. And I've been working with an amazing chef called Heston Blumenthal, who is, use this term very, very rarely, almost a genius. And I would define it as somebody who makes big lateral steps in their thinking and makes these giant steps. And he's also totally engaged with everything and everybody in the world. He's a lovely guy, but it doesn't matter who you are, what you are, he wants to know everything about your life, absolutely everything. Now, tell me everything now. Because it all ends up as a plate of food in his restaurants in the end. It's full of stories. The last one I was going to mention was a writer called Ian Sinclair, who I've done a lot with now, some films and some talks and lectures and some books and comics. And he's a London-based writer, but an extraordinary guy. And the very first thing he said to me, we sat down to think about possibly trying to collaborate on a graphic novel, a comic or something. He said, look, I don't really care if this doesn't have any words in it. And I know some writers, and for a writer to say that was special. So I think there's a few.
That's right. Barron?
I'm a little hard pressed on this one. I'm very much a loner, and I feel like I'm influenced tremendously by various things that I've done. I did spend a certain amount of time doing theater, and the collaborative process was intense for me. I found that everyone around me in that particular segment of my life was more imaginative than I was. I was very literal-minded, I discovered. And I got a lot out of that experience. I went into performance and pushed myself into areas that I never expected. I had brilliant, brilliant collaborators, and I learned what it's like to really get out of my own shell and appreciate the incredible creativity of others. It's probably something that has, after many, many years, become a pattern in my teaching as well. I've been teaching for a very, very long time. And it's not collaboration, but there is shared energy that is very close to that. And I'm entirely dependent upon it. I feel, you know, people say, are you still teaching? Oh yeah, how can I stop? Interaction with others is intense and inspiring. However, I don't really have a specific collaborator. I sort of like get a lot from everybody. It's good, I really do. And that would include great works of art that are not graphic. It would include literature and music and other things as well.
Ken?
Well, I've had a couple of folks that I've been fortunate enough to collaborate with as well. One sort of a ways back now. I did a book called Meltdown, Havoc and Wolverine with the artist John J. Muth. And when we both actually did the artwork together, and you know, if you know his work, which I'm sure you do, his work is very ethereal, and mine is a little more, I don't know, gritty or earthy. So the hope there was sort of to bring those two worlds together and do something unique with it, you know, obviously from the context of superhero characters. And after we got started, we were working with Walt and Louise Simonson, and the story was, we were sort of developing the whole story as we went along, working all together, all four of us. And after about half of the first issue, we realized that we were probably butting heads a little bit too much. So we got Walt and Louise to develop a story so that the storylines sort of, we separated the characters and had the storylines run parallel with each other. And then at the end of the book, bring the story back together, which allowed John Muth and I to not entirely have to work on this actual same comic pages together. But yeah, ultimately in the end, that was a very rewarding experience. And then more recently, I had the wonderful opportunity to work with Darren Aronofsky when he was developing the movie The Fountain, and wanted to turn it. At the time, he had retained the rights to do a graphic novel with the film before the film was made, and it was at a time where he had the first. The project fell through initially, the film, and so we jumped into working on the graphic novel together, and then he got funded again and started working on the film. So he was working on the film, and I was working on the graphic novel all at the same time. So while he was in the early stages of directing, I was sending 20, 30 pages in at a time of the story. So that was a great opportunity to work with him as well.
David?
Yeah, I'm one of those people who likes to have, I like to have my own space to be able to do my own things I want to do, the way that you do it. And then once you flex those muscles, it's so fun to be able to collaborate with somebody else and feel that kind of energy you get from them and what they bring to it as well. And nothing takes the place of like, it's almost like a third person is creative. If you get to work with someone else on their A game who's bringing something, you're bringing something, and something unique kind of materializes between it. Most recently, I'm working with author Chuck Palahniuk on a new Fight Club project. Brian Bendis and I became friends in 1993, and we started working together quite a bit from the beginning. And then at the time, he was trying to make, he's known as a writer now, but at the time he was trying to make a living as a penciler, and he immediately got me a job as his inker. So we worked at that together on all kinds of things I won't even name, because I don't want you to go look for them. And then finally when I got my first work for Marvel as a writer, writing Daredevil, and then I was able to introduce Brian's books to Marvel as well, and then we finally got to do a Daredevil project. I did the art for Brian's first Daredevil story, and it was kind of an opportunity to work with a great friend on a project that was kind of worthy of our friendship. And it reminded me of what Dave McKean said, sort of reminded me of, you had that opportunity to like, okay, this is what we did before, now let's kind of switch gears and make this all that we can be, even out, pushing the envelope of what people are expecting from it. Most recently, also this year, I did the credit sequence on the film Captain America: Winter Soldier, in which I was able to do all the art and design for the end and collaborate with the designer Swarovski from Chicago, who would sort of sync that to the music and the beats and add the type and move it around. I flew out to her studio in Chicago and just really tinkered with it, based on my drawings and what had to be there from the film, and drawing all of the characters and actors in the film and the right beats that the Marvel film board wanted. But it was something unique. It's really fun if you can add these extra dimensions of moving time and type, and then also music to something. And also Bill Sienkiewicz, sort of my big book of last year was Daredevil: End of Days, which I wrote co-writing with Brian Bendis, and then the artists on it were Bill Sienkiewicz and Klaus Janson. And for Brian and I, Klaus and Bill are guys that we grew up reading and learning from their stuff. So it was amazing to kind of be able to write a story and then see it brought to life by the guys that we loved reading their stuff when we were kids. And sometimes Bill and Klaus would be like, okay, yeah, it says this in the script, but what if we do it this way or this way? And Brian and I are like, wow, yeah, we learned everything from you guys. Whatever you want to do, change it around. And it's fun if you get to write something and then the artist brings it to life in a really unique way, and maybe in a way that you hadn't even thought of, and then you get to re-accommodate the language of the script to better show off what they did with the art. And in most cases, it means they showed with body language and sort of just the physical power of their art, to the point that we would sort of strip back a lot of the, we don't want all of our text covering their amazing images that they're making, which shows so much. We'd always err on the side of mystery, in terms of adding text to it. But that's kind of the fun, push and pull of that.
I just want to add something before we go to Bill. What you brought up is something I truly believe, that comic books are not movies. They are their own beast. And it's the beautiful synergy of writers and artists and the back and forth. That's what is the greatest thing about comic books, and that's why I come to San Diego Comic-Con. Bill?
Yeah, actually, to just add one more thing to that, I actually think of it a little bit more in the context of theater, with scrims and things that, what you can accomplish on a stage, I think, well, that's a whole other conversation.
Yeah, that's I want to say, yeah.
But
that should be the next question.
Wait, we'll do that for the movie.
I've been just in terms of collaboration, I've been sort of overwhelmed by the generosity of the collaborators I've worked with and been fortunate to work with. Everybody from Chris Claremont, and you know, on a lot of stuff for, I guess, for the superhero stuff in Marvel Comics. It was something I'd always wanted to do. And then the idea of actually just exploring and expanding the language of the medium was a big thing. And then comics was also a way for me to create my own, like, hide from a lot of stuff I was growing up from. So I tended to be a lot more of an isolationist, like Barron was talking about. But the idea of actually being in comics and working with people like Frank Miller, and when Frank Miller and I were doing Elektra Assassin and other projects together, it was literally like a game of Bumblebee Peg. I mean, we were throwing like darts at each other's crotches, you know, and just basically saying who could take, you know, and just throwing it back and forth and challenging each other. Alan Moore was absolutely amazing. Alan was very flexible. He could pretty much say, look, this is the script, and his scripts were, as legend has it, I mean, they're huge. And he'd say, if you want to do, you know, change something, go right ahead. Which is a lot like saying, you know, locking somebody in a closet and saying, if you want to play football, knock yourself out, you know? But it's, you know, I mean, my big thing with Allan was like, okay, I come up with something, I gave the character a beard, you know, or glasses, you know, that was the big thing. But I've sort of worked with people in comics and worked with David on art. The idea of collaborating artistically on something is quite interesting. In one level, I feel like the idea of collaborating with all of the people on this panel is quite frightening and daunting and lovely at the same time, because I have respect for everybody on this panel, and I sort of feel like it's like a game, that tennis game, that you have to up your game. And at the same time, there is the empathy of understanding the other artist's point of view. And then there's also ego, because we all sort of have our own way of doing things. We tend to be, you know, in somewhat isolation. So there's this kind of beautiful, like, dance and give and take and movement that can occur as well. And as far as other collaborations, I actually did work with Roger Waters on one of his concert, a song he did called Leaving Beirut, which to see something in that level of, for the public to see at a stadium, to see the artwork used to tell a political point of view in terms of songs. So you know, the collaboration is a lot like what Barron said, that there's students and there's the world, and in a way, I sort of view the collaboration. What I do is like a collaboration with the world, and I'm impacted by everything that is out there. And
it's kind of your little sandbox to make sense of everything you experience in the world. You know, you're kind of playful, or your laboratory.
Yeah, we need to make sense of things, and in a lot of respects, I mean, also just to, I don't want to take up too much time, but we mentioned earlier about the love of drawing. For anybody out there who does draw and who tends to be alone, if you're in an environment where you're growing up, you know, maybe in a level of poverty or a very stressful situation. I know when I was growing up, things were so discomfortable, like discomfortable, that's it. And I'm a big
Google that.
They were so uncomfortable and unpleasant that for me to create a world in which I was the, quote, God and control and could make characters do things, it would provide a level of safety and cohesion and some place where I could go and let the stress out. Otherwise, you know, I mean, I could have ended up on water towers, you know, with a high-powered rifle going, I really hate Mondays, you know, but I wasn't going to do that, you know, so anyway.
Excellent. Grant, how about you? Collabs.
Well, because I tend to write more than anything else these days, especially for comics, all of my work is about collaboration, so I'm kind of really into it. And as David said, there's that thing that happens. William Burroughs and Brian Geisen called it the third mind, and it's when two people collaborate and create something that neither of them could have managed on their own. So you know, I've worked with some brilliant, from Dave back in the early days, and people like Frank Whiteley, Cameron Stewart. There's so many artists, and each artist teaches me a different way to write as well, which is fascinating, and it makes it fresh every time. So I do, it's actually a central part of how I work, and it's, I couldn't live without the collaborations, you know. I need great artists to be able to bring to life the things I'm not capable of drawing myself.
Excellent. Stephanie.
collaboration has been pretty new for me because I work pretty solitarily like Barron does. So this has been a great opportunity to change my process. I normally draw in predominantly black and white charcoal drawings, and working with Allan on this project has made me expand into collaging and working with different materials. And I also have another collaboration coming up, but I can't quite talk about it yet, which I'm really excited about.
Busy with somebody on this panel.
Kent, and then we're gonna open it up for questions, and I'd like anybody who has questions to line up in there and keep it really brief and succinct, because we're gonna have to rocket through these questions. How about you, Kent? How about your collaborations? Sorry, Ryan.
As a designer, it's interesting working with a variety of different artists. I've worked with a few artists here on this panel. How differently they will approach my design process, where it's either they want to see a gajillion things, they're like, just have at it, and do whatever, and I trust that you'll do it good. I think one of my favorite things that I've done recently is I had the privilege of working with McKean and Barron together on a Lord of the Flies project last year, where they had, Barron is the illustrator of the iconic Lord of the Flies cover by William Golding. Kent then did a series of illustrations for Lord of the Flies last year for the Criterion Collection, and he came up with this idea of what if we put these images all together in a really beautifully packaged portfolio set. And that was something I got to put together last year with the three of them, or the two of them. And I really believe in presentation and elegance. I think it's something that sometimes lacks in the world. And it's just such a delight to put together something really, really beautiful with some amazing